Our guest today defies the norm in what he has become, given where he started. And that's from his wife. So we get it on good authority. Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at Mike Frans, a dear friend, and the latest guest on My Faith with Homer and Pip. I'm Tom, aka Tommy Pippins, with my dear friend Steve the Homer True and our producer Brent Young, and we're delighted to have you with us on the Zoom call during this time of social distancing. But we think that this will all draw us closer together. The faith story of Mike Frans and Homer. You always get us going.
Thank you, Tom.
I want him to explain what you just said his wife told you. That we always have this incredible story, and you make me ask, and then but you started it. So take it away, Mike. How do you respond to what he just said your wife told him?
Well, I never know what my wife says behind my back, but I can honestly say I trust her. We've been together for 41 years now, and she gets the story right and better than I do most of the time. Where can I start? My faith story, my story is meant to point to his story, to be quite honest, and so I feel a little skittish about telling my story, although I'm willingly tell it, but in hopes that anyone who hears my story realize mine's a backstory, his is the front story, and I want so much for the front story to be prominent. That's what my backstory is all about, and also to know that my story is connected to many other stories. My parents, who long before I came around, they had their stories, and I had no choice about their stories or even mine as I was coming along. And so all stories go back ways. I was a part of the very first pandemic, which we all are. It goes back to Genesis chapter 3. I learned as a pastor that, hey, it goes, you got to explain this story somewhere, anybody's story. And so mine goes way back to the very first pandemic. It's still going on. It's still wrecking lives and robbing people of hope and encouragement, and destroying needless lives. However, that invisible war, that invisible sin that we're all victims of, and that enemy of our lives, all of us don't have to be victims. That's one thing I've learned right away, and my wife could tell you that you don't have to be a victim, but you can be a victor over this. Now, having said all of that as the prelude, where do I start my story? Jan would agree. I was born in California. I was raised in Oklahoma, and I often tell people I grew up in Vietnam. That's during my service time there and my time in the war. I was born into my dad was out of World War II. I was born just after, not long before he was discharged, and then they came from San Diego, Oklahoma. They were newly married about a year or so, and were, what can I say? I didn't know it then, but I didn't know how fragile their marriage was. In fact, I didn't know that my mom had plans to divorce my dad not long after we were married or they were married because she felt sorry for him. So I thought, what a way to start a marriage. And here now I come along, and now they have a baby. I began to learn more and more about this dysfunctional family I was a part of. Both my parents had come from fractured families, dysfunctional families, broken families. My father came from 2 families of 21. He was an orphan at age 4. And so, he just grew up with a hermit and eventually left home in his teens to go join the Navy and all that kind of thing. My mom came from a broken family. While she was in high school, her dad left, and so all those kind of things factored into it. And then they decide to get married and they have kids, and here I come along. But the results of some of their choices or all kinds of things left us in a very poverty-stricken background. My mom had tuberculosis not long after I was born. She was quarantined. for 6 months. So I was raised by my grandparents early on, and then they came. And then I met my mom again, and my dad came together and grew up. I had 5 siblings, or 4 siblings, apart from me. And so as our family grew up, we knew poverty. Like I didn't know. You don't know how poor you are until you compare yourself to somebody else. So we had government food coming in on a monthly basis. Our home had a tin roof and 1 bedroom, but the living room became a bedroom for mom and dad, and the kitchen in the middle, and that was about it. And a kind of a homemade bathroom. It was just really really quite poverty stricken as I look back, and so we didn't have much to go on. What I began to discover is physical abuse. I got to witness that. I experienced that, and my siblings did well. It was very, very painful to watch parents out of control, parents struggling with each other and with themselves, and then taking it out on the kids. And so there was physical abuse, there was emotional abuse. Nobody talked to each other about anything. They just lashed out. And so that after a while, you're afraid to talk. You're afraid to do anything for fear of what might happen next. Verbal abuse, name calling of people in the family. It was very, very painful, to say the least. And as I was growing up, it was very lonely. I just felt, even though I looked around at kids at school and everybody else, and they all seemed to have it a little bit better than we did, or at least they appeared to. But I felt lonely, and it was about 5th grade that it was like the Lord awakened. He gave me a gift in music and a love for music, and little did I realize, as that kept growing and growing and growing, I wanted to do something with it. I wanted to write music. I wanted to sing music. I wanted to play music. I wanted to play in the orchestra. But our folks had no money for anything like that. And I even tried to, so I could play violin. I made a homemade violin out of a cigar box and took that to my teacher, and he said, well, that's amazing. But I don't think that's quite going to cut it. You're going to need a real violin here. And one day, out of the blue, my grandpa called me up on the phone, and he says, I found a violin for you. He said, it's a 3/4 violin. I thought it was 3/4 of a violin or something. And I thought, well, that's probably not going to work either. But it just happened to be a smaller violin. And I took it to school and finally began playing it, and got more and more interested in it. I got interested in composing music. And as my interest grew, my teachers wanted to cultivate that. I started getting interested in work at school, my education, my classes. And eventually my dad put the clamp down on me, and he says, you're not going to do any more homework stuff, bringing homework home. You're going to, I have a definition of homework, and it's working at home. And so when you get home from school, you're going to work. And so I couldn't do my schoolwork, and therefore I started failing in a lot of my classes. And then I got really depressed, and I got really discouraged. And I thought, oh man, because after a while I looked around, I thought, well, maybe education is the way out. Maybe that's the answer. And if I just get enough education, enough book learning, I can get out of this and not have to be poor the rest of my life. And who knows how I would end up. But and then when Dad put the kibosh on that, that lasted for about a year. And my teachers began sending home messages and this, that, and the other. And when they saw my report cards and I was failing in a lot of my classes, except for music, that's when it started to get their attention. And they said, okay, well, you can go back and do your homework. So I did that with a vengeance. I just poured myself into books, thinking, hey, that's my rescue. That's my ticket out of here, of poverty and dysfunction and everything else. What I learned about my story, when I look at my faith story and the turning point in my story, somewhere along the line, there's always a tipping point. There's always a turning point. And but as I look back, I realized the Lord was there all along. He was watching over me, protecting me, guiding me, providing for me. And when you look at your story backwards, you start to see signs. Oh, he showed up here and he showed up here. He used my grandpa to get me the violin. He used a music teacher who noticed I was so interested, but my parents couldn't afford bus fare across town to take lessons from this renowned music teacher from all over the southwestern part of the country. She was the first chair violist in the Tulsa Philharmonic Orchestra. Her dad had founded the Oklahoma City Symphony, and as well as the Tulsa Philharmonic. And she offered to give me lessons for free. And my folks said, well, don't get your hopes on that because we can't even afford the gas to take you across town for the lessons. And so you're going to have to get a job and work and whatever. Well, I was just in 8th grade at the time, so nobody wanted to hire me. At that point, I didn't have any marketable skills. But my teacher, who had tried to link me up with this renowned violist, he says on every Friday, he says, you're going to notice in your viola case that there are 3 quarters in there, and I'm going to put them in there for you, and that's going to cover your bus fare. I've checked it all out. It'll get you across town and back, which is about an hour and a half bus ride across Tulsa in those days. And so I graciously received his gift and went back and forth for 4 years. She gave me free lessons for 4 years, provided all the music that I needed to study. Got me a music stand. She got me a viola from a young lady who had died prematurely in a car accident, and her dad wanted so much that it would get a new home. And so I became the recipient of that viola, which I still have to this day. And I've played in the Tulsa Youth Symphony. I played in the Wichita Symphony. I played in the Springfield, Missouri Symphony. I played in a number of places and began on this journey. And this lady, Dr. Tosca Kramer, who was my music benefactor going all the way through high school, she said, well, you know, you can go to college. Nobody in my family had been to college. I was the first. And she said, you can go to college. And I thought, oh, yeah, right. I mean, you just have no idea. Music lessons are one thing, but going to college is another. And she says, well, we're going to work on that, and you work hard on your part, and eventually you may get a scholarship to go to Wichita State University or some other place. And so she worked on her end, and by the time I graduated from high school, I received a full ride scholarship music-wise and to go into music education at Wichita State University. You say, where does your faith fit into all of this? Well, you know, what I've discovered about faith, it's not so much your faith that matters, but who you put your faith in. It's been my experience that everybody's got faith. It's a matter of who their faith is in or where their faith is placed, or what they're counting on to get them through. And I begin to realize, oh, my faith is not about how much faith I have or this kind of thing, but it's more about who it's placed in. And I realized, looking around, like, well, where am I going to put my faith? I was putting my faith in music teachers. I was counting on them because, boy, I couldn't count on my parents at that point in time. Through no fault of their own, I'm not blaming them. They're with the Lord now, and they made it 54 years, even though I wasn't sure they were going to last all the way through. It was really quite painful to watch siblings leave home because of abuse and this type of thing. My brother joined the Marines, and here I am going into music. Where is this train going? And she one day announced to me, said, you've got a 4-year scholarship to go to Wichita State University. My dad didn't want me to go to college, and he wouldn't even go with me to college to see me off because he thought he wanted to, he had other plans for my life. But I could see the Lord working behind the scenes. I love my dad and love my parents, and we toward the end of their life, I was able to reconcile my feelings or lack of feelings sometimes through all of this. But I look back and I realize, oh, the Lord was providing through that music teacher who put 75 cents in my viola case every Friday before I would take lessons the next day.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
When did you discover it was the Lord? When did you discover it was Jesus? Because it doesn't appear to me that there was anybody around you that that said, "Oh, this is who you should have faith in," because that's
Yeah.
a brilliant point.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. And Homer,
who
you,
who
you
has to
and
be a who?
there is, and that's what's so cool about this story is and there's so many threads you could go down, and but one was I started with church. My parents saw church as kind of like babysitters, and they got a break from us kids. So and there was somebody who would come by and pick us up every Sunday and bring us back home, take us out for ice cream before we got home. So we loved church. I mean, going to church every week, and did that for a long time. And I used to think, oh wow, I'm putting my faith in going to church. I love the people, I love the sermons, I love the music, and it was a positive experience for me. But I realized, as much as I loved church, what I was missing was a relationship with Jesus Christ. I heard about him. I had listened to stories about him. I listened to sermons every week, and they were passionate. And I never read my Bible. I took it so I could get brownie points and that kind of thing, so to speak. I got little stars each week for all the things that I did to make sure I was tracking. But here's where the turning point was. I went to church. My parents started going to church when I was in high school, and I thought, oh no, now they're going to mess it up because I'm actually enjoying church, and now they're going to be looking at me while I'm in church. But my mom and dad couldn't agree on which church to go to, so dad went to one church, mom went to another, and they'd come home on Sundays and argue about which church was better. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, get me out of here. But finally, I went off to Wichita State University. Didn't have a car, but I wanted to go to church. I wanted to keep that going in my life, and so I called up a pastor in town, a little church in Wichita, Kansas, and I said, my grandpa's heard about you, and he said I should call you if I needed a ride to church. Is there somebody who could come pick me up? And he said, well, I'll come pick you up. I didn't know he was on the other side of Wichita, Kansas. He was the pastor of the church, and he had to drive all the way there and all the way back. And he did this month after month after month. And we had a lot of conversation on the way about faith and about the Lord and about Jesus. And of course, I got to hear him preach and every Sunday. And it's just like, oh my goodness, I did that for about 8 or 9 months. Well, just before the end of the school year, I saw many people come to Christ that year. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's cool. I believe Jesus is real. Otherwise, I wouldn't be going to church. But on the other hand, I had a church relationship, but I didn't have a Christ relationship. I didn't have a Jesus relationship. And my first year in college, some of my professors, including my own music professor, my new viola professor, was an atheist, and he tried to discourage me. He said, "You don't want to go to that church thing. That's beneath you. You don't need that, and you don't need Christianity. That's just all a hoax." And so that was working against me. And here I was still going to church, and all these wonderful people, just simple folks who love Jesus. And they just reached out to me. And here I am reading all these books and going to the library and doing all these things. And they just kept loving me. And they couldn't answer all my questions. I even went to the Wichita State Library to the religious section. It was a pretty small section. And I started looking up everything I could have about Christianity, and almost all the books that in that section were against Christianity. So I thought, well, this is really encouraging. And then I had the struggle: is the people at church that I'm seeing, are they for real, or are these people who are so against Christ and against Christianity, are they for real? Who's for real? Well, one day I went to church, and a young man who had become a good friend of mine while I was in church, one day he announced to the whole congregation, "I become a Christian." My heart sunk, because I was looking at him and I was counting on him. I thought, well, if anybody's a Christian, he is. And then when he announced that he hadn't been a Christian, that he was just going through the motions and everything else, I thought, oh my goodness, if he's not a Christian, then there's really not much hope for me. And so that's when my self-examination began. The Lord began to search my heart. He began to draw me closer to himself. I soon realized I needed a rescue out of this pandemic that impacted my life, that made me so proud and insecure and everything else. And so about 3 or 4 weeks later, my search ended. I stood up in church and then I announced, I remember going right to the very front of the church, and I knelt, not facing the congregation, but just they had an altar down in front, and they invited people week after week to come to Jesus. I remember going down, I knelt there, and my tears were streaming down my face, and I invited Jesus to come into my life and be real to me, and to change my life and change this pandemic in my life that was destroying my life, I'd seen it destroy relationships. I didn't want that for me. And,
How many years ago?
oh my goodness. I was 19 then, I'm 71 now. So you can see it's been a while. My freshman year at Wichita State, that was a turning point. And but that was just I'm not going to tell the rest of the story, but that I realized now that was just the beginning of my faith journey, and it was going to continue through college and through Vietnam, being in the war, getting married, having children, and then being a pastor for 43 years. I mean, it's just one faith story after another, but it's all about having put my faith in Him. Homer, if I could summarize it in 2 ways, so the turning point for me, it came down to 2 things, 2 words: do versus done. Do versus done. Either there's something I've got to do to make God pleased with me and happy with me, and want to settle with me, so to speak, or me to settle with Him. Something I got to do, and I could do that the rest of my life and hopefully get it right, or it's based on something He's done for me, either what I do for Him or what He's done for me. And I realized, of all the religious billboards out there, all 2,000 plus of them, they all center around what you got to do for God. And I looked at Christianity; it's in a league of its own, and it comes down to the story of what He's done for me, and He gives it to me as a gift. And if I just embrace Him as a gift, like a gift wrapped in a person, and I just embrace Jesus in my life and in my heart, and give my life to Him. Now it sounds too good to be true, and if Christianity's in a league of its own versus all the other world religions that say, here's what you got to do, and Christianity says, this is what I've done for you. This is what Christ has done for you.
We've never met before, and I didn't know your story. I'm thinking, well, he became an accountant or an engineer, and I'm skittish to tell my story. For how many years you were a preacher, minister? What?
Yeah, 43. And
well,
you know what?
Wait a minute. So you've had all this incredible, tough things, which would give you some point to say, God, what did I do to deserve this? And you have a relationship, and then at one point you said, I don't know, I'm going to take it to another level. And you're skittish about that? I am very confused. Tommy, you're going to have to take it from here. I want to hear the answer to this.
Well, it's called humility, Mike. You handle it. You handle it. It's called humility.
Well, I want his story to be the front story. I mean, mine is the backstory. It tells how it couldn't have happened, shouldn't have happened, or whatever.
But how many people in your life have you turned to Christ? How many?
Oh, I don't know, and I'm glad I don't know. In some ways, what is really great is I look at all the shoulders I've stood on, of faith-wise people that He brought into my. I'll tell you one thing, one smidget thing, Homer, and that is because of my family and the upbringing background. I had a lot of makeover work and redoing work to be done after I became a Christian. And God, one of the details in my life is He put me in the several other families to live with them and experience what a Christian family looked like, what stability looks like, what a functional family looks like. Before I ever went in the ministry, and that began to be a turning point for me, because for the first time in my life, I thought, hey, I wouldn't mind getting married. Before that time, I thought, man, I feel like I've been married most of my life, and I don't want anything to do with that. Now I embraced it, and I'm a happily married man to the love of my life. I have 2 wonderful children, 4 wonderful grandchildren. I couldn't be more blessed. And now I'm retired, as some people put, I call it refired. It's a new season of my life, and I'm just waiting for the next part of the story. It's his story to write, and it's my story to tell others about.
Well, I just want to let you know, I didn't have to go to Wikipedia to get this, but it may be a backstory, but it's one hell of a backstory. Don't ever say that to a minister. Come on.
Hey, that's okay, man.
All right.
I'm very glad. I summarize it in one sentence. I say, if God can save me, He can save anyone, and if He can use me, you have no excuse.
Wow. Take it away, Tommy. Try to beat that.
You can't beat it. Can't beat it, buddy. No question about it. Mike, through it all, your story is absolutely fascinating. You won't mention it, but you were decorated multiple times as a medic in the war. Your wife didn't know that until recently. You've been married for what, 41, 42 years. And you led a couple of men to Christ, including one just before he was, well, quote unquote, blown up. And his wife and his mother, who you went to visit, had been praying that he would be saved. There's so much through your incredible career, through heart surgery. Your life has been described as a tapestry of grace. From there, my friend.
Well, I can say, man, it's His tapestry and His grace, and He's weaving it all together into a story that I could never write myself. I wouldn't. I'd be too afraid to write my story, and I don't get too many chapters out there ahead of myself because I know He gets the last word. Yeah, the rest of the story, even the war story. I've met so many veterans over the years, and most of them, especially having spent time in war, are not eager to talk about their experiences. I mean, they're going on radio silence for years. For me personally, people say, well, why do you even want to talk about it? And I say, I really don't want to talk about my experiences so much. However, there are headlines out there where God is in the story, even in violence and war and everything under the sun, and His story is still waiting to be told. And I said, if I could just see His story and tell His story, the headlines that nobody would ever guess of what He did behind the scenes, I think, man, that's a privilege of mine. So I love telling His stories. I don't have any need to tell my stories as it relates to war stories and that type of thing. But having served my country, I do that again. I don't like war. Having been a medic, you like it even less when you see the trails of carnage. However, I love my country. I'm so grateful for it. But I'm always aware, from God's perspective, we're all from a even better country than this. This is a wonderful country, but God says He has a better country in store for all of us, called heaven. And man, I'm game for that. But in a nutshell, His story, my story, the stories come together, and hopefully, when all is said and done, they remember His story and realize mine was just the backstory to His.
They always say, and I don't even know who they are, but the peace that you show is incredible. How, I don't even know if I want to say how. I just want to say it's impressive, amazing. If you say one more time, I'm the backstory, it'll be the 100th time. But how long have you had what just feels and seems, looking at you, an incredible peace?
Homer, that's a good question, and I often look for the scriptures to give me an explanation for my life and the lives of others that I've worked with over the years. And Philippians 3 talks about, in the New Testament, it talks about a peace that passes all understanding. human understanding wise, I don't get it. I've met people who've been through more things than I ever would ever want to go through, and yet they have this incredible peace. And I say, it's not that I have the peace or how long I've had it, but who has created that, who's made that possible, and it's part of the package of knowing Christ. There's that peace that passes all understanding that only He can explain, and that's something I'm grateful for. I think it's in increasing measures. I mean, over the journey, I remember my days in the army and in Vietnam, and just say I was just standing there so peacefully. On the inside, I was scared silly. The young man that I led to Christ the night before he was taken out in an ambush. We were talking just the night before over some sea rations, and he says, "Doc, you seem so calm about all of this here." And I said, "Well, I'm not so calm on the inside." And he says, "Well, how do you handle this stuff?" And I said, "Well, it's just that I have somebody bigger than me to go to." He said, "Well, tell me about it." And I did, and I just shared with him John 3:16, where God so loved the world that He gave His Son, that whoever believes in Him would not perish but have everlasting life. And he said, "Well, yeah, I've been to church in my life, and that didn't seem to fill the hole in my life like it has for you." And I said, "Well, it's not about going to church. Church is wonderful. I love church. I've pastored for 43 years in churches, but I said, look, it's not about going to church. It's church is a byproduct of being in a family, but to get in the family, you have to have a relationship, and the relationship with Jesus Christ is the starting point. And once you're in, now you have a family, a new family, and you get, it's not some families can be dysfunctional even as Christian families, but nonetheless, that was so that night he said, "Well, how do I do that?" And I said, "You just talk to him just like you're talking to me." And he called him. I'll never forget that night. When he addressed him and invited Christ into his life, he called him sir. He called him sir, and he invited Jesus into his life. And little did I realize 6 months later that I would be going to visit his wife, his parents, his younger brother named Doug, and just incredible. So I'm amazed, not at my life. I'm amazed at him, what he did for me. There's no comparison. What I've been through, what he did on the cross, no comparison. No comparison. I have no reason to whine or complain, but simply I put my faith in Him, and the object of my faith is much greater than my faith, much greater than my faith. And that's why I'm holding up, because I can count on Him. He's never let me down once.
Finish it up, Tommy. This. Take it away.
Yeah, as you say, there's no topping that. Whatever book the Lord might lead you to write, or podcast, or speaking engagement, I think that my good friend Steve the Homer True, my good friend Brent Young, our producer, and yours truly will be blessed to be exposed to it, as will many others. Mike Frans, thank you for sharing your faith story. It was special.
And Tom, thank you, and Homer, and for giving me this opportunity to share. It's just a privilege to share, to give others hope, to tell others that that pandemic that started back in Genesis 3, that's affected every 100%, all the statistics we try to keep up with on a daily basis about the current pandemic. The one in the scriptures is really simple. 100% have been impacted. 100% could be totally destroyed, and yet 100% can be totally rescued from that pandemic. And so I have somebody who's simply been rescued and here to tell about it. And so I'm glad to tell my story, and I'm glad to share it with others.
It's a great blessing. This has been My Faith with Homer and Pip. It's a video podcast. Mike has a great way with words, one of his many gifts, and he said, we'll have fun on the Godcast, so maybe we should call it that going forward. If you out there, we're so thankful you're with us. Pray you've been inspired in some way in your own faith journey. If you know someone who you feel would be a good guest to do the same thing, as Mike has done and others, just send a little email out to me, pippinstom@yahoo.com, P-I-P-I-N-E-S, pippinstom@yahoo.com. For the Homer, for Brent, for good friend Mike Frans, Tommy Pippins here. Thanks, everybody, and God bless you all.